This is the super simple everyday pouch. This is a very, very basic zipper pouch pattern that I made, and adding a few new details onto it. I'm hoping to add a D-ring. I'm also going to be adding an exterior pocket. I think that would be a great detail, and I'm going to use mesh fabric, attempting to add an interior patch pocket, so that's a detail you could do. You could certainly do this in a scrappy version or a quilted version. If you are using a quilting cotton, you definitely want to at least stabilize the main fabric, just because quilting cotton is a little bit lighter weight than canvas. This pink zebra print, I think it's super cute. And I have already interfaced this piece with Pellon ShapeFlex 101. I've got my zippers all ready to go. Lining piece is about 10 inches by about 8 inches. I want to create a patch pocket in the center. We've got a piece of fabric that is 9 inches by 7.5. Take your piece and fold it in half this way. The right sides will be together. Leave an opening for turning here, and then you'll be sewing like around here, and then turning that, and then we'll be turning this into a patch pocket. I will use a little Elmer's washable school glue to baste this. I will not sew like from here, like just, let's just say to here. So this is the part I won't be sewing, so I need to leave an opening to turn this right side out. Be sewing from here to here, and then from here to here. So I'm just gonna press this. Instead of using pins or basting, I usually use like a tiny bit of glue just to secure it. All right, here we go. So about right here. And I do also sell these fine tip bottles in the Sewing Report Etsy shop as well. I use mine all the time. Okay, so we're over at the sewing machine. This is the Juki DDL 8700, just standard 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you do want to back stitch at the beginning and end. This is like literally real-time sewing here. So when you get to the corner here, you'll try to judge the best you can at what a 1/4 inch is. I think about 1 more stitch. All right, there we go. And then leave your needle down and pivot. Corners can be a little tough. I do have a video on the Sewing Report all about doing corners and curves, so if you want to check that. So now here is the part where you're not going to be sewing. So I'm going to back stitch again. And then I'm going to lift my needle up, move over to the part where I'm going to start sewing again. So I skipped over that whole section there. But you're also going to want to back stitch here. So back stitch at all of the start and stopping points. When you're turning this, if you don't do this, the thread will just come apart because there's nothing keeping it, locked in place. And then finish this, and you will back stitch again. And this machine has a little lever to back stitch. So this is going to be how you turn this pocket right side out. Just to get this started, I'm going to finger press this. When I do turn this right side out, I have an easier time tucking this edge in. So we'll do this on both sides and give it a quick press. Now I am going to trim these corners just to eliminate bulk at these corners here, like this. Through the opening, just turn this right side out, and you'll need something to poke out all the corners. So I use a chopstick that I got for free from like Publix or something. All right, so you got all 4 corners here. So this is just how you make, and you could really put a patch pocket on any pattern with a lining. You just have to, as I had done earlier, you just have to determine what size you want the pocket to be, and then do the math to figure out what size fabric you need to cut. Basically just double the size of what you actually want. I've got these little ends tucked in here, and this matches up pretty well. Here's the ends tucked in here, the little extra fabric, and just put a little glue here, and then this will keep it in place until I sew it down. Hit it with the dry iron. I'm not using any steam or anything. So this will be the back lining piece. So now I just have to figure out where I want this on the piece. I'm just going to take my lining piece and fold it in half the long way like this. Press it with the iron so I have like a fold line here. And then I'll do the same thing with the patch pocket. So the place I glue basted is going to be down on the bottom because I'm going to be sewing that part shut. So I'm going to fold this in half. I think I'm also going to add a sewing report label too, so we'll do that as well. This is how I'm going to put the pocket on. Match up these center lines, so like this, and then you can determine how high up or how far down you want. You do need to make sure you keep this seam allowance area clear, so you can't have it like way up here because you're going to be sewing here. That's why I didn't make the pocket like the whole way. You need to give clearance for sewing the seams. Dutch Label Co. sent these to me like a while ago. I totally forgot about them, and they're real cute. They're woven, they're like gold and cream. I think they're very classy looking. I kind of want to put it on the pocket, so maybe we'll do that. I'll do the same thing. I'll just fold this label in half to find the center point, and then I'll just put it on here. I'm also going to use the glue to hold that down temporarily, so we'll do that about here. Okay, I'm just going to let this dry for like a minute. I normally, with the labels, like to start on the bottom, try to get fairly close to the edge, and then I just sort of eyeball it. So it's not super exact. I'm like, okay, so this is about good. And keep your needle down and pivot when you need to turn the corner. Okay. And I just try to get like fairly, oh, okay, I went a little too far here. Here we go. And notice I'm going fairly slow. I have this set on like 350 stitches a minute. It can go way faster, but I just don't do that. And then when I get to the starting point where I, started the stitch line, I will overlap it a bit just so that the stitches lock in place. So that is how I sew labels on. I'm not super exact with the placement. I just sort of eyeball it and it works okay. The Sew Tights magnets are like one of the most popular items in the Etsy shop. So I might actually use these magnets to hold this patch pocket in place. So since I folded this in half, I'm just gonna line this up with the center point here, and this should be, it's not gonna be perfect, but it's gonna be okay. These are nice because it's not gonna leave holes in your fabric. It's also super easy and like not messy at all. So I haven't actually really used these for this purpose. These will actually keep the pocket in place, see, as I'm sewing. You're basically going to sew from here down along the bottom and then up the side, of course leaving this part open since it is a pocket. And I am going to reinforce these sections a bit. I'm probably going to sew like a little rectangle or something, because I've noticed that if you don't, like, these pockets can sort of like bow out. I'm probably going to do like a little more stitching up at the top corners here. Sewing about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here. And like, look how easy it is to add a pocket to whatever. You can add a pocket to shirt, you can add a pocket to like pants, whatever you want to do. You can really add this pretty easily. All right, so I'm gonna back stitch a little bit because I just want more reinforcement here. All right, so I'm just gonna sew. Yeah, these magnets are a little bit heavy, but they do work pretty well. I'm going pretty slow. I'm gonna stop at the corner here. All right, so I probably need like, let me see. And I always check, all right, so you see there's a little extra space here. I need about one more stitch here. Okay, so this should be about good. I'm gonna move this back just a little bit. Okay, so I'm putting my needle down, stopping, lifting the presser foot, and then turning the whole project here. I'm also gonna take this opportunity to just clip these threads just so they're not in the way. Okay. All right, that corner is a little messy, but that'll be okay. I wanted to show you just all you could do with this pattern and to really make it your own. So we're going down the bottom here, 1/8 inch seam allowance. My stitch length is about 2.5 again. So we're gonna slow down as you get to the corner, and I can really feel the bulk there too. Sort of get myself out of this corner. Okay. All right, so we're getting up towards the top, and I'm just gonna back stitch a few stitches. Okay, and then I'm gonna keep stitching. So at least there's like triple reinforcement at these top corners. Okay, and that's it. This is the back lining piece, and when this glue dries, you won't really be able to see it, but if you wanted to, you could just wash that away, so that would be pretty easy to do. This will be the front lining piece. We're gonna create a mesh pocket for the front. I sort of like the placement of the zebras a little bit better on this piece versus this piece. So we'll have this be the front of the pouch. And this is by Annie mesh. So when you figure out how far down you want the pocket to be, I would just like fold this, literally just like fold this in half and press it. And then you have a fold line that you can use. Okay, so I'm gonna use this fold line as a determination for where this pocket will go. And this mesh is like slightly stretchy. You also want, like, it has sort of like a honeycomb pattern. You want the honeycombs to be like kind of going up and down because it sort of stretches this way. It doesn't really stretch this way. Bias tape maker. This makes a 1-inch single fold bias tape, and then when you fold it in half again, it'll be a 1/2 inch. I usually cut fabric strips about 1 3/4 inches wide. First, creating just a straight edge to work off of here. It's easier when you start with an angle. This will make it just easier to work with overall. Here is the bias tape maker, and you need to like sort of like finagle this into the tape maker. And if you turn it over on the other side, you can use a pin to sort of draw it out here. Here we go. Kind of got it through the tip here. And then as you pull it through the tape maker, you'll need to iron it like this. So keep the iron here, and then notice I'm sort of pulling it out slowly and then ironing it as it comes out. So this is how you make, like, this is a bias tape maker, but obviously this is not cut on the bias. You really don't need bias tape unless you are going around curves. But since this is just a straight edge, this will work. This is single fold bias tape, so this is what the tape maker creates. Double fold bias tape is basically this, but it's just folded in half. So that's what we're gonna do now. All right, this is done. I think it looks pretty good. So this is the binding tape we'll be putting on this pocket here, sandwiching the mesh in between here. So I'll use the clips here, and we're gonna use that to keep this in place while we sew this. I have this like real skinny foot on here, and that's great because it's good for top stitching. You don't really need to back stitch here because this is going to be sewn into the project anyway, so it's really not necessary. You can, but you don't really have to. And then remove the clips as you sew. I do wish I had a walking foot on here right now. That's my ride or die sewing foot, but I kind of need this skinny foot now. And plus, for parts of this pouch, it will be hard to sew with the walking foot on, so that's why I've got these feet on. Here is the mesh fabric sandwiched in between my binding strip. This is going to be placed on top of my main front panel of the pouch. Folded this down, so I'm gonna use this fold line here to line up the pocket. These are magic pins, but they have a flat head. They're extra fine. I find they don't really leave holes in the fabric, and I'm going to just line this up here, and then I'm going to pin this into place. I'm going to be basting this to the front piece. All right, so I think I'll have enough clearance for the D-ring. I gotta leave about 1/4 inch for the seam allowance up here. This is why I have to like think about these things, because if I'd put this pocket up higher, this wouldn't really fit. I'm going to baste with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all around. I'm also gonna use a long stitch length. I'm gonna start a little bit before the pocket. You just want to catch all of this mesh fabric so that it stays in place while you're sewing the pouch together a little bit later on. So I'm going around the curves. This is the front main panel of your everyday pouch. I'm going to fold this in half, mark the center up top here, down here. Basically, you're doing connect the dots here. This pen will disappear. either with water or with air. Start here, I'm going to sew back up here, and then I'm gonna sew back down again, just so it's like doubly reinforced. This is pretty easy. Everything's kind of in place. Again, it doesn't have to be super exact. Don't worry too much about getting it perfect. All right, so now that I'm just one stitch basically past the pocket, I'm just going to, I got my needle down, presser foot up, pivot, and then you're just going to stitch back over that same line again. And because this thread matches the mesh pretty well, it'll sort of blend in, so you won't really be able to see it. Okay, and no back stitching because you're basically just going over the same lines of stitches. We now have our mesh pocket done. Technically, you could fit your phone in there. I'm gonna trim off some of this extra. So now we've got our front pocket done. So this is the back of the pouch here, so it'll be like this. This is our lining, so this is going to be the patch pocket in the back. So we've added a lot of new detail that the original pouch does not have. I'm going to use this swivel clasp and turn this into a wristlet part so you can attach it to the pouch. This is going to be the D-ring tab. On interfacing like Pellon ShapeFlex 101, this is a woven stabilizer. One side feels more like fabric, and then the other side, there's like little rough dots on it, and that's the glue. So the glue side should be on the wrong side of your fabric. Now I'm gonna flip this over so that the fabric is right side up. This will be a tab I attach to the side of the pouch, and we're gonna put a D-ring on it. The easiest way I found to apply interfacing is to basically spray the fabric like this. I'm just gonna press and hold this for a little bit, and this is how I fuse my interfacing. It's like 10 seconds or something like that. So it's on pretty good, and it just gives your project a little more stability. So if I just did the quilting cotton alone, I think it would pretty easily get worn down as a D-ring tab. It just wouldn't hold up as well. So this kind of gives the fabric a little extra body. And again, quilting cotton is normally meant for quilting. The bag making thing, it does often need a little bit of extra help. This way across is 4 inches, and then this way across is 3.75. Let's see here, yeah. Fold this in half. This is the 4-inch side, so the 4-inch side should be, you should be folding that in half here. Try this out. Leave a little bit of room here. So you're gonna fold this like this. Okay, like this. Fold this in the other way like this. You'll fold this in on itself, and this is going to be your tab. If you want to get a professional look, try to get this as even as you can. Let me get out the D-ring here, and then you're going to be sliding this into here like this. So this is the D-ring tab. This is a little bit thick, but it should hold up pretty well. So that's what we're doing now. I will just glue base this a little bit. And this is a pretty thick piece. You can add a pretty generous amount of glue, and this is just Elmer's washable school glue. This is a very budget-friendly glue to use because it's everywhere and it's pretty cheap. I'm gonna hit it with the iron just to keep it in place, and this is a dry iron. I'm not using any steam. I'm going to be using about a 3.5-inch stitch length because this is top stitching. This part over here is not gonna be visible, so you can sort of, you don't have to be super careful about it. But you see how much the fabric stays in place with the glue basting? It doesn't shift around. Everything's very stable. Pivot. You really don't have to worry too much about things right there. Go back around this way. Top side looks better, so I'm gonna put this on the outside of the D-ring tab. From here, you can fold this piece in half lengthwise and insert the D-ring like this. I'm actually going to sew back around here, but I'm gonna sew as close to the D-ring as I can to keep this in place. And a lot of this is actually going to be inside the pouch or like cut off, so you don't really have to worry too much about it. So really do take your time and make sure that your D-ring tab looks nice. I'm gonna try to get as close as I can to the D-ring here. This handles it pretty well. And I might actually go over this stitching another time just so that it's pretty secure. This area is probably going to get quite a bit of stress on it just from usage. I think I'm gonna go over this section again. And this is where I think having an industrial machine does come in handy, because this machine powers through these layers pretty well. So I'm basically just going over these same stitches. I'm gonna have this face the front because this is like the better looking side. I'm gonna take this piece that we have the pocket on, and we're also going to be basting this D-ring to this part. When the D-ring is on the pouch, it will look like this, right? So I'm going to be folding this in. I also want to make sure this clears the seam allowance. So the seam allowance is a 1/4 inch. I'm gonna try to put this fairly close to the edge here. This is gonna be about a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. Yeah, I mean, this sewing machine handles it pretty well though. And I'm gonna back stitch a little bit just because I know this is gonna be kind of tricky. Okay, so let me take my scissors and I'll be trimming off some of this. We're gonna start actually sewing the pouch soon. Trim off some of this with some scissors. This is gonna be the front piece, and then this will be the front lining piece. So this will be on the back of here. And then this is gonna be the back lining piece. And then this will be the back front piece. So when the pouch is done, front of the zipper is gonna be on my left. I'm going to flip the zipper face down, turn this over, and then I want there to be like about equal space on the side. So you need at least a 1/4 inch for our seam allowance. The lining piece will be face down. Start off by using one clip. Keep the zipper tab in place. When I'm sewing these, if there's a zipper, I like to start sewing on the side that doesn't have the zipper pull on it. The first line of stitching will be with the main fabric on the top. When you're first placing these clips, place the flat side face up because you're gonna be sewing with this side down, if that makes sense. And I start from the center and then work my way out. At the sewing machine, I'm actually gonna sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and start on top here. I'm going to be doing about a 2.5 inch stitch length. So we'll take the stitch length a little bit smaller here. 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go slow because you really need to make sure that the layers are as even as possible. So you want them all flush with each other. You do need to back stitch at the beginning and end here. That is very important for this step. So remember, 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and end so this doesn't come out. I will take out the clips as I go, but then you also need to make sure that your layers, you might have to keep finagling them so that they're even with each other. So you see, I'm trying to keep them as lined up as I can, and I'm gonna keep moving these with my fingers as I go. You see, if we keep sewing this way, this is gonna get in the way. Needle down, lift up my presser foot the highest I can, and then I'm going to pull the zipper open. I know it's kind of hard to see, but I'm gonna pull this open. Here we go. So now it is not in the way, and I've got total clearance to finish sewing. Because this sort of curves out a little bit towards the end, you're also gonna need to be mindful of that and just sort of keep pushing it into place with your fingers. Don't sew over your fingers, that would be bad. Back stitch. The zipper is open. I'm going to close the zipper up again. You can start to see it coming together like this. All right, so finger press this away. And notice this lining fabric is a tiny bit smaller than the main fabric. So that's on purpose. All right, so the next thing we'll be doing is the back side. Zipper facing up, and then I'm going to flip over the main fabric like this, and then flip this over so that the zipper is face down. You already have the fabric on the other side done. You can sort of use that to line up where the fabric on the other side needs to be. So I really try to match up the fabric on the sides. And then because the zipper pull is now on this side, I'm going to start at the sewing machine with the lining part on the top because this is going to be the easiest for me to sew like this. We've got all our pieces sewn onto the zipper tape like this. I'm going to close the zipper back up for now. So the next thing we're going to be doing is top stitching. I want to really get a crisp edge here. Really press this away because this will make a difference later with the finished pouch. Do it to the other side here. Press, but just be careful not to get your iron on the mesh, keeping it away from that mesh part. I used to make this mistake and I always wondered why my projects were so hard to sew at the end. When I used to top stitch, I used to put these layers together and then I would top stitch this entire sandwich here. It's going to be a lot easier for you if you separate one piece of the main fabric from the other 3 layers, top stitch just here with all of the other 3 layers facing the opposite direction. And there's really no need to backstitch here either, because top stitching is more for aesthetics. So I'm gonna change my stitch length to a 3.5, and we're gonna top stitch about 1/8 of an inch. So notice again, I've got just the main fabric, and then the other 3 layers are like pushed out of the way. And I'm going steady, but not going super fast here. I'm trying to keep my stitching as straight as I can. Because you're going to be turning this right side out, you're going to be birthing this pouch. You need to open up the zipper a little bit. I don't open it up the whole way. I'll open it up about 3/4 of the way open. So this should be about good here. And then you're going to be placing the main fabrics right sides together and then the lining sides right sides together like this. And I'm going to be clipping all of this together and sewing all the way around. This D-ring will have the tendency to flop out, so make sure it stays in. That part's gonna be a little tricky, and when you sew this, you will want to go over that a few times. I know a lot of people get confused about this, but the zipper should be facing towards the lining side. So you don't want the zipper facing like this way. You want the zipper teeth pointing to the lining. It can be a little tricky because you want the fabric to be lined up pretty evenly. Also, you're going to leave an opening for turning. There is a section that you will not be sewing here. So I'm gonna mark this with a line just so that I know. So about here to about here. I'm gonna give myself a pretty good opening about here to here. You'll be sewing all the way around here and then stopping here. So this is where you're gonna start and stop. You will need to back stitch pretty good at the start and stopping points, because when you turn the project right side out, your threads can pop. So you want to make sure you have a pretty good reinforcement of threads here so that that doesn't happen. So let's start clipping this together here. I use a lot of clips, and these I just got from Amazon. These are not even like the brand name Clover clips. These are just the generic stuff. This is the main fabric. You want the teeth to face this way. You really want these fabrics to match up. That can be a little hard. So I'll usually put a clip right on that section and right on that section on the other side. So we're gonna go over to the sewing machine, and then we're going to sew, start around here, go all the way around, all the way around, all the way around, and then stop here, back stitch at the beginning and end. That's very important for this. I'm gonna do about a 2.5 inch stitch length. You're gonna need to kind of wrestle this sewing machine a little bit at this part, because it's gonna be a little tricky to like get totally close to the zipper. This is not gonna be the easiest part of this project. And I'm going to be back stitching a little bit here. So let's back stitch here. So you see, I'm going over this section multiple times. There's gonna be a lot of stress put on this particular area. I'm trying to push it down as much as I can with my fingers. And this next part is also gonna be kind of tricky. And this is another area that I'm going to be reinforcing again. So, all right, let me get my 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, so I'm going to be back stitching here too, because this area is also gonna get a lot of stress on it. And I just wanna make sure that things don't come popped out. Because of these add-ons, that's something I kind of feel like I need to do. So what I normally do with these projects is, especially at the curves and corners, you want there to be less bulk at the seam when you're turning it right side out. I am not going to be cutting this area for turning because I need this fabric here so that I can tuck it in to stitch shut. So I'm going to start around here, and then I'll be trimming this seam allowance. But at this part with the very bulky area, I will use regular scissors just because I find this cuts best at this area. So I'll use regular scissors just for this particular area here. All right, so sort of carve that out, and I'll do it on the other side. I'll also be using the regular scissors for the part with the D-ring tab because this is just really thick. So I know I'm not gonna really be able to get it with the pinking shears. All right, so we'll cut this. This is gonna be like pretty thick. All right, and then we'll just use this to cut this part. So if you are going to be turning out a project and then closing up this opening, I find it works best to try to press, like we did with the patchwork pocket, try to press this area out a little bit so that you have a guide for where to fold it afterwards. We're gonna turn this right side out. So this is also gonna take a while. This is always sped up in videos. If you don't backstitch, your stitches would just pop out. This is also why we opened the zipper a little bit, otherwise you wouldn't even be able to get this open. The last thing we need to do for the pouch itself is close up that opening in the lining. So that won't be that will be really easy. So I'm going to pull the lining back out. I'm gonna glue baste this little section here and then sewing that back up with the sewing machine. You don't really need very much glue, just a small amount. Hit this with the dry iron and you don't need pins or anything. It'll stay put until you sew it. I'm gonna do about a 3.0 stitch length. Wherever the opening was before, I'll start a little bit before and then end a little bit after it. Do a couple back stitches. All right, and then stitch forward. And notice when you glue basted it, again, no fuss with the pins, no having to, everything stays put. All right, so now back stitch again. Okay, and then front stitch. Here is the edge stitched lining, so you closed that opening. The last step is to just push this back into the pouch. These side seams lined up fairly well, I think. Let's take a look at this side. This side actually lined up pretty good too. So this is why I wanted to match up these areas the best I could. All right, and really push that lining into the pouch. The back, I'm gonna press, this is a little bit wrinkly, so I'm just gonna spritz it with a little water here. We'll just sort of press this back. You can press the front if it doesn't have the mesh pocket on it. I could probably steam this a little bit. So we'll steam this. I don't think that'll hurt it. So we'll do a little steam. And this will help get your project to look a little bit neater. And you can also add a little zipper pull tab to this little donut zipper pull here. So look at how different these look. So again, this one's great too. This one's obviously faster to make. It's a little easier and it's, not as time consuming. All right, so to make the wristlet, I'm not even sure how long I want this to be, but I'm going to interface this. Yeah, actually I do think this would be best to be interfaced all the way around. This is a long strip of a fat quarter, 21 inches by 3.75 inches. Working with an inch swivel clasp here. So obviously this is much bigger now. So to do that, I'm going to fold this in half and then fold it in half again. Fold it in half lengthwise like this. And then you're gonna wanna press and then keep pressing. So go all the way down like this. Now I'm going to fold this in and just keep pressing. So fold in, fold in, fold in. I'm not going all the way to the center. I'm leaving a little space there just to accommodate bulk. So if you fold this in again, you have a strap and you have no exposed edges or anything like that. Once you double this up for the wristlet, it's gonna be like more like, you know, like this. So this is a pretty good length for a wristlet, I think. This started out to be about 21 inches. I'm going to put this through this little like D-ring here. So it's gonna be like this. Honestly, this is kind of like when you're doing quilt binding. I'm going to be sewing it down like this. So fold this on the diagonal like this, right? You're gonna sew about right here. So again, this is actually very much like quilt binding. Press this. So I'm basically just glue basting this little section here. All right, so I'm gonna go over to the sewing machine and sew this section right here. And I'm gonna use the diagonal line as a guide here. Probably could have drawn out that line, but it'll be okay. So I'm just gonna basically stitch from corner to corner here. Okay. I did it on the diagonal to reduce bulk, and now I'm going to trim this down. I'm gonna trim the seam down to about 1/2 inch, just to give me a good amount of room to work with here. The seam allowance is spread out pretty well, so that's why I decided to sew this on the diagonal. Now I'm going to take the part that I glue basted, unpick this a little bit. So we're gonna unpick this, and then we're actually going to be like pressing this flat. All right, so we're gonna press these seams open here. So now because you already have the clip on, I'm actually going to be top stitching this with the clip on it and just sewing in kind of sewing in a circle and moving it out of the way. So I'm gonna need to repress these areas here. I think I am gonna glue baste from here. This will keep this in place. This will give you a much neater finish, I think, because things won't be shifting around. I'm going to top stitch about 1/8 inch on either side. As you go along, you're going to need to keep moving the clip a little bit. Again, this is why I glue basted, so that the edges wouldn't shift around a lot, especially since I'm not using a walking foot. I thought that would help. I'm gonna overlap the stitches by like 1 inch here. I'll do a few back stitches just to be safe here. I'll move this over here. There we go. But notice, since I sewed this on the diagonal to attach the ends, I don't have any super bulky sections, and I think that makes a big difference for sewing this together. And again, notice I'm continuing to move the clip as I go so it doesn't get in the way. All right, so we've got the whole strap top stitched. Figure out where you want the clip to be in relation to the strap. This part with the seam on it, I am actually going to have that be where the clip is. I think that'll be the least noticeable thing. I'm going to be sewing a little square, like a square or rectangle here, just to keep this clip secure. I'll lower my stitch length to about a 3 here, and I'm just sort of eyeballing it, and I'm gonna go over this rectangle a couple times. When I get to the sides, I'm just going to match the stitches I already made. This is gonna be tough. I'm glad I have an industrial. You might have some trouble if you have a regular sewing machine. And if you think this would be difficult, you could use a little bit less interfacing. But yeah, this part could be a little tricky. I'm gonna trim my threads here. This part's a little bit bulky for sure. Again, if you don't wanna do this, you can use a little bit less interfacing if you think you'll have some trouble here. So you can do that. You can kind of modify this if you don't think your sewing machine is gonna handle this. So I'm just gonna sew around this way again. This is struggling. Like, this sewing machine is pretty powerful, but this part is definitely fairly bulky for the Juki here. Okay, we're gonna go around one more time. Okay, yeah, that's tough. This side looks a little bit messier. This side looks a little bit better, I think. From here to here, it's about 7 inches. So I think pretty much most people could fit their hand through there. I mean, you could use this as like a keychain just straight up if you wanted to, but you could also attach it to your new everyday pouch You can obviously use different sizes of the D-ring and the swivel clasp. You would just have to adjust your measurements so you can clip it on and off. So you could really turn this into a little clutch purse. The other thing you could do is, again, if you use thicker fabric or if you use a quilted version of this, it's gonna be a little more stable. You could also use a single-sided fusible fleece. Like Pellon makes one. This is just a leather punch tool. I got mine from Tandy Leather, but you can find them from Amazon or anywhere. All right, this is gonna be pretty tough here. Okay, I think I got it. And now we've got our hole. So this is the everyday pouch. This is a pattern by me. It is free. You can get it at sewingreport.com. Let me know what you think about this project. Which extra detail do you think you would add to a pouch of your own? Again, this fabric is also in the Etsy shop. This is called Wild Expedition. It's like a safari print fat quarter bundle, and it is really, really cute. But I hope everyone has a great week. And remember, whatever you're doing, make it fun.